Before we start the video, I'd like to ask for your support. This channel is new and we really need subscribers. It's very important to help keep the channel going. Please support us by subscribing so we can keep bringing you more videos with stories about pilots and operations. Now let's get into the video. Early on the winter morning of January 13th, 1922, when the sun came up over a patchwork of orchards in then-rural Oakland, California, Clarence Emil Anderson took his first breath. For the rest of a century, the wiry boy who answered to the nickname Bud would be propelled by that same restless air, drawn toward anything that flew. He built gliders out of scrapwood, pedaled a bicycle for miles, to gape at barnstormers performing outside Sacramento, and talked his way into a first airplane ride behind the rumbling exhaust of an OX-5 Jenny. From that moment, engines and altitude were inseparable from his sense of possibility. He scrubbed grease off spark plug threads at a local airstrip for the promise of stick time, pulled frames for school wrestling to earn enough muscle to handle control cables, and read every line of Air Corps magazine he could find in the public library. By 19, he had a civilian pilot's license and a determination hardened by the knowledge that a wider war in Europe would soon demand every skill he could learn. He entered the Army Air Force's Aviation Cadet Program in January 1942, standing in lines that looped around municipal buildings full of equally determined young men. The process sifted out thousands through academics, medical inspections, and the unspoken test of stamina demanded by barracks heated only by faith and wool blankets. Anderson thrived, progressing from primary trainers at Tuscaloosa through Texan, advanced trainers at Luke Field, Arizona. In September 1942, he earned his pilot's wings and a second lieutenant's bars, slipped them into his breast pocket, and wired home. Made it. Heading for fighters. Fighters, sleek, single-seat frontline machines, were where the war tested individual nerve and collective doctrine in 4-second bursts of 50-caliber fire. By late 1943, the new P-51 Mustang was proving itself over Europe, and Anderson's 357th Fighter Group began forming at Tonopah, Nevada, before moving across the Atlantic. The 6-day ocean voyage placed him on a storm-battered troopship that smelled of sweat, coal smoke, and anticipation. When he stepped onto the damp platform at Stone, Staffordshire, he tasted cold English fog for the first time. RAF Leiston, in Suffolk, would become home. There, as ground crews unpacked crates of spare Merlin engines and winter Parkers, Anderson met the men on whom his life would depend. Crew Chief Joe Red Grant, armourer Vernon Karp, and a teenage English polisher, everyone called Smudge, who swore he could see prop wash with the naked eye. They painted Old Crow in block script under the exhaust stacks, after a Kentucky bourbon the pilot had never tasted, and began scratching dates of completed missions beneath it. The 8th Air Force was losing bombers faster than the factories could replace them. The daylight offensive needed an escort fighter with the range to shepherd B-17 flying fortresses all the way to Bremen, Berlin, and back. The Mustang delivered, and its performance invited aggressive tactics. On February of 1944, Anderson saw Germany for the first time, a snow-dappled landscape bristling with flak bursts. He felt a quickening as neat rows of Messerschmitt Bf-109s swarmed from the sun, their tan noses flickering cannon fire at the silver bomber stream 2,000 feet below. Throttles forward, gun sight brightened, he rolled inverted and dove. The first mission ended with no enemy fighters destroyed, but no bombers lost in his sector, a modest beginning that felt, in the mess hall that night, like victory enough. The duel that would come to define his European tour unfolded on June 29, 1944, as the 357th covered a heavy raid aimed at oil refineries near Magdeburg. At 25,000 feet, the cold gnawed even through electrically heated suits. Anderson's flight of 4, running low on fuel, angled south to clear remaining Luftwaffe patrols before turning west toward the Channel. Over the town of Halle, he spotted 8 silver-grey Bf-109Gs climbing hard beneath scattered cloud. They were fresh, climbing into a sun arc that would let them pounce on the straggling bombers. Instinct and training fused. He called tally-ho, rolled inverted again, and slammed the stick forward into a high-speed dive. He firewalled the throttle, pushed the nose down 40 degrees, felt the Merlin creak past 3,000 revolutions per minute, and gained 15 knots in the blink of an eye. The first German pilot never saw him. A 2-second burst at 300 yards smashed through the 109's engine mounts. The fighter became a funeral pyre that shuddered and fell away. Anderson flattened out, skidded into the blind spot of a second 109, and squeezed again. This time the enemy broke left, black smoke obscuring the canopy as glycol poured out. A third opponent tried to climb vertically out of danger. Anderson followed, riding the velocity vector until his guns chewed the tail section. 3 victories in less than 4 minutes, all while keeping wingmen close enough to prevent surprise attacks from above. Discipline in the midst of chaos. By the time he rejoined the bombers, he had expended half his ammunition but preserved every fortress in his care, yet he never romanticized the experience. When bombers went down, entire crews vanished in blossoms of flame. Once, orbiting the smoking wreckage of a B-17 near Schweinfurt, he counted men jumping without parachutes, their clothing burning. He recorded the moment in his combat diary with clinical brevity. Bad day for 91st Bomb Group, and spent the evening letter-writing in the officers' club because somewhere in Kansas, someone's mother would need to know how her boy had fought. By September 1944, Anderson was an ace several times over, credited with more than 10 aerial victories, though personal tallies meant less to him than the statistics that mattered to the bomb groups: tonnage on target and crews returned alive. The 357th success derived from disciplined teamwork. Before mission briefs, Anderson drilled his element. Leaders, repeating the mantra, check 6, work high-low, keep your wingman in sight. After landings, he walked the flight line to thank Red Grant, who insisted on precisely torqued spark plug leads, believing they saved lives as surely as marksmanship. Whenever Anderson scored a victory, he chalked a tiny crow on the fuselage. Whenever the group lost a pilot, he poured a double shot of coffee into an empty canteen cup and drank in silence. December brought the Battle of the Bulge and worsening weather. Ice-coated Mustang wings so thickly that mechanics attacked airplanes with wooden mallets before takeoff. On Christmas Eve, Anderson escorted B-24s toward Germany, low sun, dazzling snow-covered forests. The Luftwaffe, now desperate, hurled jet-powered Me-262s at the bomber stream. Anderson could not match the jets in level flight, but he could ambush them during landing approaches. Near Rhine, he managed a pass on a 262, his gun camera capturing flashes as rounds struck the starboard nacelle. The German jet staggered, but escaped. Anderson logged the encounter as a probable and shrugged it off, more relieved that his bombers were already feet wet over the Channel. His final combat sortie on January 15, 1945, ended almost prosaically. A long escort run to Berlin, where enemy resistance had dwindled to ragged flights of green trainees. He felt a strange melancholy taxiing in, shutting down Old Crow and realizing that the next man to lift the canopy would do so not in anger, but to prepare the aircraft for a return voyage to the United States. He was 23 years old, possessed of reflexes honed to a razor's edge, yet grounded by the sobering recognition that many friends, Kit Carson, John England, Loren Doc Evans, would never again hear an engine startup checklist. Stateside, Captain Anderson transitioned, first to P-51Ds for pilot training duty, then to the jet age at Wright Field. As a test pilot, he strapped into everything that carried wings: the F-84 Thunderjet that killed men with unexpected pitch-ups, the needle-nosed F-104 starfighter that outpaced bullets, even giant B-25 Mitchells, re-rigged for complex G-load tests. Chuck Yeager, one of his contemporaries, described Anderson as a gent with ice water in his veins and perfect hands. The compliment did not inflate Bud's sense of self. He simply adapted, recording flight data with an engineer's precision and teaching younger pilots that the purpose of experimentation was to write checklists so the next generation might avoid fatal surprises. In 1953, the Korean armistice left the world braced for Cold War. Anderson commanded a squadron of F-86H Sabres at Misawa, Japan, flying barrier patrols so close to Soviet airspace that the Alaska-based DEW line occasionally misidentified the formations as intruders. During those dusk patrols, he confronted a new reality. War might now open with nuclear weapons, and the first blow could leave no time for the kind of chivalric aerial jousts he had once fought. The only remedy, he believed, was unmatched readiness. Maintenance logs in his command became as scrutinized as gunnery scores. Vietnam tested that creed. Promoted to colonel, Anderson took command of the 355th Tactical Fighter Wing at Takli Royal Thai Air Base in 1970, inheriting a battered F-105 Thunder Chief fleet. The heavy fighter bombers had been designed to streak low and fast under Soviet radar. Over North Vietnam, they encountered radar-guided SAMs and anti-aircraft guns that learned quickly. Anderson tackled sagging morale by taxiing out first on the earliest morning frag orders, leading the opening strike himself. He flew 25 combat missions, emphasizing disciplined formations that reduced losses by a measurable percentage. Some officers called the approach old-fashioned. The sortie survival rate said otherwise. After 3 decades, he retired from active duty in March 1972. But flight did not retire from him. McDonnell Douglas hired him as a flight test manager, and civil life afforded time to restore a Mustang painted in the familiar brown and yellow of Old Crow. At air shows across the American West, he performed precise, understated routines, refusing the knife-edge passes popular with flashier exhibitors. Spectators sometimes asked whether the Triple Ace had ever been frightened in combat. Of course, he told them, courage is discipline applied to fear, not its absence. The nation remembered too. In 1990, Anderson collaborated with historian Joseph P. Hamelin on the memoir To Fly and Fight, a plain-spoken account that became required reading in Air Force classrooms. In 2008, the National Aviation Hall of Fame inducted him. 7 years later, as part of the American Fighter Aces Act, President Barack Obama presented him and surviving aces with the Congressional Gold Medal. Most dramatic of all, on December 2, 2022, a special order signed by the Secretary of the Air Force promoted the centenarian to Honorary Brigadier General during a ceremony at the Aerospace Museum of California. The applause shook the hangar. Anderson raised a right hand still steady enough to fly. His legacy lives in artifacts. Yes, the preserved gun camera films, the bent oxygen mask he yanked off after a desperate climb, the Old Crow restoration that gleams today in olive drab. But more enduring is his philosophy, that a fighter pilot's purpose is not thrill or vengeance, but protection. Anderson's 16 1/4 victories are numbers. The ordinary bomber crews who reached home because he refused to leave their sides are flesh and blood. He drilled elbow curves on blackboards for maintenance apprentices, convinced that a perfect hydraulic line saved more lives than the deadliest burst of gunfire. World War II dogfights have gained a varnish of nostalgia, helped along by colorized film and console game recreations. Anderson rejects easy romance. He remembers shattered canopy glass embedded in leather flying gloves, remembers the loneliness of turning for home after the last bomber had crossed the Zuiderzee. knowing his own fuel state balanced on mathematics, calculated by an overworked lieutenant back at Leiston. He remembers February 20th, 1944, when Lauren Evans spiraled into cloud north of Leipzig, calling "Tell Mary I love her" on the radio. Preparation could tilt the odds. It never guaranteed return. Percentage favored him that summer morning over Halle, when he executed a perfect bounce. Yet had the lead 109 pulled 5 degrees more bank, had a single 20mm shell found Old Crow's glycol lines, history would read differently. What endures is the preparation that allowed him to exploit opportunity, the consciousness that every gallon of high-octane fuel and every minute of flight time emerged from a national effort measured in factory shifts and ration stamps. America, he likes to remind cadets, put wings on its moral obligations. At 103, he still tears up, remembering the silence that followed VE Day, when the 357th no longer woke at 0300 to the sound of trucks ferrying crews to briefing huts. The noise in his head, Merlin pistons, tracer hiss, radio chatter fell away, replaced by the recognition that he would soon return to California haunted by the smell of cordite and the sight of railway bridges collapsing in slow motion from 8 miles up. Peace felt, he says, like someone turned the world down to idle. His story has been taught in the dormitories of the Air Force Academy, retold whenever a new class confronts lessons on aerial leadership. In those lectures, the Duel of June 29 serves as a case study in situational awareness, energy management, and the restraint of waiting for an unambiguous shot rather than spraying area fire that might endanger friendly bombers below. The footage still exists. Jerky black and white, 90 frames per second, tracer arcs disappearing into the mottled sky the moment a German wing snaps off and tumbles like cardboard. It is studied frame by frame, not to glorify destruction, but to understand responsibility. Late afternoons find him sitting on a porch in Auburn, California, where Sierra foothills catch the same golden light that once danced on Mustangs climbing out of Leiston. He keeps a leather-bound logbook on the table. Inside, against each mission, entry he preserved short rye marginalia, Hamburg 20mm flak heavy, Berlin clock stopped. B, near the bottom of the last Europe page, he scribbled in red pencil, "Done my share." The phrase is characteristically understated. One cannot tally the survival of strangers, but Anderson feels the arithmetic in his bones. He believes the art of aerial combat represents both the best and worst of human ingenuity. In 1944, only 22, he controlled more destructive power than entire infantry regiments, yet he used that power in measured bursts. On the troopship ride home, he stared at passing farmhouses and felt an unexpected kinship with German families who would never see the young men he had shot down. That empathy, he says, secured his peace far more than medals ever could. Today, replica Mustangs painted as Old Crow, some powered by original Packard Merlins, others by modern turbine conversions, still thunder over airfields from Oshkosh to Duxford. Whenever one climbs steeply and arcs overhead, children look up wide-eyed, as Bud Anderson once did at Sacramento's dusty field. The circle closes there, in the spark of imagination that turns curious onlookers into future aviators. Anderson understands the lineage. He personifies it. His story is not merely a chronicle of kills and sorties, it is a meditation on duty carried through the cold silence beyond contrails. In 2024, the United States Air Force invited Anderson to observe a red flag exercise at Nellis Air Force Base. He eased himself across the hot tarmac, steadying each step with a polished oak cane, while the low growl of F-35A turbines rolled over the desert. A young captain, fresh from the weapons school, asked how to handle an adversary who kept forcing overshoots in the vertical. Anderson answered with the advice that had carried him across Europe in 1944, "Whatever you decide to do, do it all the way. Half measures get you killed faster than mistakes." That afternoon, he attended the mission debrief inside a windowless auditorium where plasma displays replayed the engagement in ghost blue wireframe. Computers annotated every trigger squeezed down to the millisecond, but he focused on a single icon drifting 2 miles outside supportive range. He tapped the screen and said, "Here's where you lost mutual support. Fighters win in pairs." The room went silent. The lesson transcended generations. The following month he spoke at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. The auditorium overflowed, visitors queued around marble corridors to hear a living link to the 8th Air Force. Anderson talked without notes, remembering a lone Bf-109 pilot who parachuted near Bad Frankenhausen after their duel. He confessed he never learned the man's name and wondered, more often as years passed, whether the German veteran had survived the war and grown old under the same sky. During the Q&A, a schoolgirl asked if he hated the men he fought. He paused, then replied with pilot-like economy, "I hated an idea, not a person. The men in those cockpits just wanted to live, same as my bomber crews. Our job was to end the killing sooner." The answer distilled his philosophy more sharply than the 2 distinguished flying crosses or the Bronze Star listed on his ribbon rack. Old Crow, now kept in flying condition by the Palm Springs Air Museum, still carries 3 small punctures in the left wing where debris from a disintegrating FW-190 once peppered the skin. Visitors run their fingertips across riveted aluminum and imagine tracer rounds hissing past. Above the cockpit, a placard Anderson repainted in 1995 reads, "Knock the socks off 'em, then bring the boys home." 11 words that remain his distilled testament to purpose. In the twilight of his remarkable life, Brigadier General Clarence Bud Anderson stands as a living bridge between the piston-engine dogfights of World War II and the sensor-driven combat of the jet age. His 16 confirmed victories, flawless escort record, and later stewardship of test and combat wings illustrate how disciplined preparation, respect for teamwork, and unwavering moral purpose can elevate individual skill into a force that safeguards thousands. Anderson's philosophy, that a fighter pilot's true mission is protection, not glory, resonates as powerfully in today's cockpits as it did over the flak-torn skies of Germany. Yet his legacy reaches far beyond statistics or medals. Through decades of mentorship, memoir, and quiet example, Bud Anderson has reminded succeeding generations that courage is disciplined fear, that technological mastery must serve ethical ends, and that the bond between those who fly and those they defend is sacred. As Old Crow's Merlin still roars at air shows and young aviators study his gun camera footage, Anderson's life continues to teach. Mastery of the skies begins and ends with responsibility to others, and real victory is measured in lives preserved, not enemies destroyed.